Hello and welcome, everyone, to our June 18th, Third Thursday. Never Too Late, debuting after 50. We got a really exciting program here to show you guys. But before we jump into that, we got a few announcements to share. And before I do that, I realize I never introduced myself before these things. Hello, everyone. I am Jay Evan Parks. I'm the executive director of the Writers League of Texas. Some of you guys may know me, some of you may not. But I love my job, and I'm excited to tell you a little bit about the Writers League has going on um, before we dive into this program. So, first up, did you know that we just had a whole bunch of really cool classes and events these past few months from January to now? WLT members are eligible to purchase the recordings of all the classes we've held so far. In fact, if you buy three, we'll buy two, get one free with that. We have a little code in the chat box there Sarah dropped for everyone. So if you get yourself, just go grab some recordings. They're going to be, we have some really good classes taught by really fantastic instructors. You're going to get something of worth out of it. Also ongoing now, you can see the yellow reflecting on my face. We have our 2026 manuscript contest open for submissions. Maybe you saw some ads about this, maybe you saw an email about this. The deadline to enter is July 10. I encourage you to get those in sooner than later because we got this contest has become something that I've realized more and more is way cooler than I originally thought it was. It's pretty simple. You get to submit 10 pages of your manuscript and a synopsis. And coming out of that, you are eligible to receive a critique if you enter in that level. And the prizes, on top of, a good cash prize and some other stuff, is um, the chance to meet one-on-one with a top professional, usually a literary agent in your category, as well as to be featured in this really cool thing we have called the Ink List. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with something called the Hollywood Blacklist. This is kind of our version of that. It is a way where we take our winners and finalists of this contest, we put them out in a very pleasing document that we then send around to all of our industry friends, uh, who then send it around to all their industry friends. And it has a bit of a long life going around through there. And I have even just from last year know of many book deals that were made off of this list. So if you feel really confident in your manuscript, the first 10 pages of it at least, consider submitting to this contest. Maybe you'll get agents knocking down your door instead of the other way around. Also happening this summer is the summer writing reboot. This is something really exciting. Sarah and I have been bouncing back and forth about as we have been approaching this. You guys may be familiar with in the years previous, we've done a virtual summer writing retreat. It was 3 weeks, three classes, four classes sometimes. We decided to shake things up. It was getting a little stale. We do a lot of classes all the time. And we've been hearing a lot of requests for very specific types of programs. So what we decided to do was grant your wishes. This reboot is going to be a kick to your creativity this summer to give you a chance to get down to the brass tacks of writing and finding your your muse, your creativity, but also it's a chance to maybe get a little bit of critique going on, if you know what I'm saying. Sarah dropped the link to the page there on our in a chat box. I would encourage you to open that in a new tab and review it after tonight's program. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, next week we have a bit of a small program coming up. The 2026 Agents and Editors Conference is happening next weekend here in Austin, Texas, at the beautiful Hyatt Regency Hotel. This is our 31st conference we've held. I believe it's our 13th with the Hyatt. And we are bringing in more than 400 writers, industry professionals, agents, editors, so many people to a amazing. Yes, that is you, Catherine. Thank you for being in our marketing. Thank you for being in our marketing. It's a wonderful picture. You have a beautiful smile. Is a wonderful weekend that Catherine can attest to. About I got completely off track there. uh, Listen, you guys have heard us talk to death about this conference. If you're not convinced yet, I'm not sure what I can tell you to convince you. It's going to be amazing, and we have less than 10 spots remaining to sign up. So if you want to come, you're about to miss your chance. So baby, buy your tickets. Uh, all right. And next month, that's right, next month, there is a world after our conference, is our next third Thursday. We will be doing Men and Monsters, writing compelling villains. We have a few panelists already announced, RJ Joseph and Jiran J. Zhao. These are two really fantastic writers. We have a little bit more up our sleeves that we'll be announcing leading up to this event. So you can go ahead and RSVP now and make sure you will be in the room for that. It's going to be a really great time. All right. You may have heard me saying earlier that this is our 45th anniversary. The Writers League has been around for 45 years, since 1981. That's 45 years of supporting writers, of finding ways to connect you with the gatekeepers of this industry, of figuring out how this industry even works, because golly, I don't know how a person is expected to figure it out by themselves. We are your community. By coming to this event, joining up as a member, donating, coming to our classes, our events, you are part of this writing community. We try to make ourselves as available and accessible to you as possible. And if you appreciate that in any kind of way, we encourage you to sign up for a 1 year membership. Maybe kick us a few dollars. This is a free event we host monthly. And, in lieu of a ticket price for this event, we encourage you to maybe send us $5. It really means a lot. It goes a long way for ensuring we can continue to offer programming like this and many of the other programs that we offer, such as our Project Wise program, where we put authors into Title I schools across the Austin area. Events like our Texas Write program, where we travel to rural libraries all across Texas, bring free half-day writing workshops, and many, many other programs that we are constantly doing to try and just support you guys. If you show a little bit of kindness our way, it means we can keep doing it. Anyways, enough about us. And other people should probably kick a few dollars too. This event is done in coordination with Book People. Book People is our official independent bookstore bookseller for Third Thursday. And wouldn't you know it, they have to be carrying 3 really fantastic books by 3 really smart writers that you, by the end of this conversation, if you have not already put those books into your shopping cart and purchased them, you probably will. So we'll be dropping that link throughout in the chat box throughout this event, and just maybe you go ahead and open it up now and preemptively fill your cart. Anyways, that is enough from me. I've spoken long enough, and I will be happy to pass it off to the wonderful Sarah Renee Beach. Thank you.
Hello, welcome everyone. As Evan mentioned, my name is Sarah Renee Beach. I am very lucky to be the program director for the Writers League of Texas. I also want to give a warm welcome to those of you that are joining on the YouTube live stream. Thanks for finding us. Tonight, we will be talking about how it's never too late to not just become a writer, which I really do hope by the end of this conversation you will find should be self-evident to us all, but also to pursue traditional publishing. We have a stellar lineup of panelists joining us tonight whose writing I deeply admire and who I can't wait to hear more from tonight. So here goes. I'm going to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Jennifer Eli Bowen. Jennifer is the author of The Book of Kin. Her work has won a Pushcart Prize, a Tim McGinnis Award, the Arts and Letters Prize, among others. Her prose can be found in The Sun, Orion, the Iowa Review, and elsewhere. Jen is the founding director of the Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop, mom of resilient sons, and proud resident of St. Paul's Midway neighborhood, where sidewalk poetry takes the place of broken sidewalks. Jen, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And Parul Kapur was born in an oil town in India's northeastern jungle and grew up in Connecticut. Her novel, Inside the Mirror, a story of twin sister artists in 1950s Bombay, inspired by her experiences as a reporter in the city, won the Pattis Family Foundation Creative Arts Book Award and the AWP Prize for the novel, and was longlisted for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize and New American Voices Award. Parul holds an MFA in fiction writing from Columbia University. Her award-winning short fiction has appeared in Plowshares, Pleiades, Wascana Review, Midway Journal, and more. She spent a decade as a freelance journalist in Germany and France and has worked as a press officer at the United Nations in New York. Her articles and reviews appear in The New Yorker, The Wall Street Journal Europe, Esquire, Art News, Art in America, Los Angeles Review of Books, Guernica, and the Paris Review. If you've picked up a notable publication, you have maybe read Perul's work. Um, the Kimmel Harding Nelson Center for the Arts, Hambidge Center, Log Haven Artist Residency, and others have awarded her writing fellowships. She lives in Atlanta and is at work on a novel about a young couple in trouble. Um, Parul, thank you. I can't thank you enough for joining us tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
And we are also joined by Kalehua Kim. Kalehua is the author of Mele, winner of the inaugural Pacifica Poetry Prize awarded by the Asian Pacific American Librarians Association. She was named one of Poets and Writers' featured debut poets for 2025 and was a 2023 winner of the James Welch Prize for Indigenous Poets. Her work has appeared in Poetry Northwest, Denver Quarterly, Calyx, and Oiwi, a native Hawaiian journal. Kalehua, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And I want to remind everyone in the audience, I've heard some folks say, oh, my video is not working. This is just video of the panelists. That's our format tonight. It's a webinar rather than a Zoom meeting. But I do want to let everyone know that we will be taking audience questions towards the end of the program. And I really do encourage you to submit questions to us. The way to do that is there is on your Zoom toolbar, you will see the words Q&A. If you click that, it'll bring up somewhere where you can type in your question to us. And at the end of the program, we'll have all of our questions in one place and we could go through them. If you put your question in the chat box, it could get lost, because folks will be hopefully chattering. I do encourage you to also chatter with one another in the chat box. But be thinking of questions as we chat this evening, and we will get to them at the end. Okay. So I have so many questions. I couldn't stop writing questions. Because I love your book so much, and I just respect you all so much. But I want to start with a question that I had posed the audience in the beginning during our pre-show. What's the earliest memory you have of feeling like a writer? And is it a feeling that stuck with you, or did it go dormant and pop back up later? And when did you actually start calling yourself a writer? And Jen, let's start with you if that's okay.
Sure. When I'm asked this question, I'm always trying to decide if I want to start with the sad memory or the happy memory. And so I'm gonna be brief and combine them both because that is the writing life for sure. The first time I felt this like very strong, passionate compulsion to be a writer was in second grade. And I don't know how many of you have had this opportunity, but Hallmark invited us to join their greeting card contest, and it was for Mother's Day. And there was something in my mind that got switched that told me if it got put in print, it would make my love stronger. Somehow that would make it more legitimate. I don't think I articulated it to myself at that time, but when I didn't win at all because my poem was terrible, I will just tell you right now, I said, "My mom is nice. She is not cold like ice. She is a nurse and she carries a purse." Why did I not win that award? I can't imagine. I was devastated, and it was like my love didn't exist after that. And so that was my first kind of experience with wanting to articulate something and have it be seen by the world and taken seriously by the world. And many years later, I guess it always circles around love for me. In junior high, I wrote a love poem and I just needed to get it off my chest. And it was the first experience I had with really just expressing honest emotions. And it didn't matter what the outcome was. It felt really good to realize I could articulate something to myself and to someone else that needed to be heard. And so both of those moments felt like moments where I needed writing and I wanted it. I probably didn't call myself a writer until graduate school, even after winning writing competitions going on later in high school and junior high. Probably not until graduate school is when I finally allowed myself to use that label. And maybe I'm a little embarrassed to say maybe not until after my first publication. Like somehow in my mind that needed to happen before I would allow it. And if you're on this Zoom and you haven't had your first publication, that's a lie. You can call yourself a writer without that. But yeah.
I second that. Thank you for sharing those stories. Kalehua, what about you? When did you first, what's your first earliest memory of feeling like a writer, and when did you start calling yourself a writer?
I think I've always had this sort of clandestine like love affair with writing where it's just something that I had for myself and I didn't let anybody into that. So I think I've always felt like I was a writer in terms of that was my main creative outlet and the way to process. And so I enjoyed writing for the act of writing first. When I was younger, I used to copy out song lyrics onto folder, like binder paper. And I remember my brother had the Christopher Cross album and it had the liner notes with all the lyrics on it. And I spent days just copying out all the lyrics because I loved how the pen felt in my hand and what it felt like to have a blank sheet of paper and then to have a full sheet of paper. So I just really, it was the act of it, the physicality of it that appealed to me at first. And it wasn't until maybe I was, 9 or 10 when I started writing my own poems and thinking about stories. I didn't actually call myself a writer probably until grad school, sort of like Jennifer. But I went to grad school at 50. So I still have trouble calling myself a writer sometimes. It's easier for me to say that I'm a poet because not a lot of people sort of actively read or admit to reading poetry, or they say it's too hard. And so I feel like, oh, if I'm a poet, then that's easier for me to digest and also for others so that they don't have to feel like they have to say, oh, well, have I read your book? Or because that is sort of a natural progression, I think, when you tell people you're a writer, they want to know where they can get your work. And sometimes it's not always easily accessible. So yeah, it's been a little bit of a struggle for me to grasp that identity.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. I definitely want to come back to that like poet writer identity. There, but I really identify, I'd forgotten about liner notes. That really is like you're like, oh my gosh, this music is washing over me, and you go to the liner notes. That was an experience I had too. You wanted to see it written.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's so interesting. Parul, what about you? When did you first f have the feeling like you were a writer, and when did you actually start calling yourself one?
I think that, like the others, I was pretty young, and um, I think that the feeling grew out of, the practice in a sense, because I had come to America as a child of 8. So I was in elementary school in New Jersey, and the teachers had all kinds of little writing exercises. So a couple of things that I really remember a lot is I think maybe I was in 3rd grade or 4th grade, maybe 4th grade. And, you know, I don't know what the assignment exactly was, but something about writing a poem. And so I was very excited by that because I was excited. I think because I felt kind of rootless. I didn't know where I was. I've been my whole life and world had been uprooted, and I come to America, which felt like a very strange place to me because it is very different than India, especially back then. And so anyway, so writing, I liked it because it was like I could put my thoughts, my ideas into this poem. And I decided that, I had a lot to say. So I called my poem Life. And I thought I'm going to give out, like, I'm going to write all my ideas about life. And a lot of it, I still have it. And if I look at it now, I realize so much of it is like things my dad used to say, like, oh, I don't believe in having any regrets. And so my line was, you shouldn't have any regrets in life and things like that. And some stuff, I guess, was from me. So that poem was very meaningful to me. And I liked the way that, I kind of felt empowered by being able to write and put my voice forth and what I thought. And another time when I think I felt very empowered by writing as a child was we were living in New Jersey, and then 5 years later, I moved at the age of 8, so maybe I was 10 or 11. Anyway, we had to leave New Jersey. I was being uprooted again to move to Connecticut. And so I thought that I should leave something of myself behind in that house. And so I decided that I should write like an autobiography. And then I wrote it on many, many sheets of like this very pretty strawberry stationery that I had. I was just like, I couldn't stop writing once I started. And then I folded it up like a letter. And I thought I'm going to tuck it under the carpet. So then the people who move in, like I wanted it to be a little bit of a mystery, like not just leave it lying out for them. So if they ended up taking off the carpet, then they would discover this letter and then they would read it and they would know, there had been a person who lived in this room and this was the person. And that was something that I was really like thrilled about writing and leaving behind.
So cool. Do you know if they've ever discovered it or?
I don't know. I don't know if at that time there's any like forwarding or contact information
Yeah.
or whatever. I just wrote my story, and who knows, whether they saw it, whether they ripped up the carpet. And but it was just something that I wanted to do because I had all these different experiences, like being in India, coming over. I was probably just trying to process it all in my mind, like how did my whole life make sense? And then in terms of calling myself a writer, I think I always felt even though I went to Columbia, I did my MFA, I had published short stories, something about it, because I hadn't published a novel, it was difficult for me. I guess I would tell people I'm a writer, because I remember somebody at my son's school saying that, oh, Parul's a writer. So I must have told her that. But otherwise, I would feel more comfortable saying I was a journalist because, there I did have, I was writing stories that were getting published and things like that. So that was a more sort of practical thing that I could say that I'm a journalist. The writing, I always thought I should have some big book to point to, but I didn't. So
Yeah.
I felt embarrassed about that.
It sounds like you all have had similar experiences claiming the identity of writer. But writing is it's a practice. It's primarily a practice. So I do want to hear from each of you kind of how your writing practice has evolved over time. And I find it interesting that it sounds like everyone almost starts with poetry, right? And then how did you make it to your primary genre that you're writing in now? Jen, essays, Kalehua, you're still writing poetry and that's your primary mode. Parul, how did you make it to fiction? Let's stick with you, Parul.
How I made it to fiction. Well, even in elementary school, we were also given little assignments to write stories, but I think there was also a teacher once. She always had these. It was the 1970s, and so she was very creative and wanted us to imagine, like, what is a room? How would you describe a room that embodies the value of peace to you? So I remember that's like one assignment I remember because that really like challenged my imagination. Like, oh, because peace was always a word that was being said, right, in the 70s. And then it was like, well, how do you imagine a room that looks like peace? So I wrote my description and everything. I think that maybe made me interested in imagining things. And I don't I mean, I guess I started writing stories when I was in high school, probably related to assignments in class and things like that. And then, I went to India to work as a journalist there. I went back after college, after I graduated, I went to work as a journalist. And then I decided after a year, I thought maybe I want to move back to India and just stay there. But after a year, I thought, no, I think I want to go back to the US. My family was here. And and I want to do an MFA in fiction writing because I had met people while I was at Wesleyan who had been at Columbia and so forth. So, so then of course in the MFA program, you're just constantly writing stories. But I also and then an agent I met said, you really need to have a novel if you want to get published because short story collections don't sell. So then I started thinking, okay, like, how do I construct a novel? That seemed overwhelming because I was only about 23, 24 years old at the time. And then all of my India experience was very fresh in my mind because I'd literally just come back from there. And so I started to think of this story that, literally just got published 2 years ago, about twin sisters who are artists in the city of Bombay, where I was a journalist. And I had met this man who told me the story about how the modern Indian art movement was born in the 1940s. So I was just taking like different pieces, things that I'd heard, my own desire to be an artist as a young woman, kind of infusing that in my twin sister characters, but they want to be a painter and a dancer. I didn't want to write about a frustrated writer, wanted to be a writer. And so, so all those things came together, but I simply didn't have the skills at that time to write this very ambitious story that I wanted to write. So that was like a 25+ year journey.
Oh my gosh, yes. I definitely want to circle back to that journey. But Kalehua, tell us, how did writing as a practice really take root for you, and especially with poetry?
Well, for me, writing is mostly it has always just been an outlet. I never imagined that I would be published or have anything published. And that's why I was saying it was kind of clandestine earlier, because it was just something I always did for myself. Growing up in my family, my mother would say, you can do all the artistic things you want to do, but you have to have a practical profession. And so do all your fun stuff on the side on your own time, but you have to have a 9 to 5, you have to have your own money. So it was just something that I did for myself when I had time after all the other things, which I think, contributed to why I didn't even really actively seek out publication until after my children were older. So as a practice, it was mostly for, I did a lot of journaling. I started with journaling. And then would write poems. And from time to time, I would send them out, and sometimes they'd get accepted and sometimes they wouldn't. It sort of felt like a little mini win if they did. And then I would kind of just move on with whatever else I was doing. But it wasn't until the pandemic, actually, where online classes became so much more readily available. And I was able to take classes from organizations similar to yours, but all over the country or all over the world. I mean, there was one that I took, I think that was like in Australia or something. So that just made it more accessible for me. And my whole family was home anyway. I didn't have to drive kids to school or take care of a pet or whatever it was. We were all sort of housebound. And this was something I could do at that time while my children were doing online school. And that was where I started to really gain more confidence in my writing and to really gain community as well, and to find other people who were sort of in the same boat. Like this is an act that we're passionate about, that we're excited about, and we have stories to tell. And even if we just form a writing group and tell them to one another, that could be enough. So I was lucky enough during one of those classes to talk to a teacher who, although she had published a few books, fiction, she'd written novels, she went back to do a low residency MFA at 50. And so I had asked her sort of advice on what that was like. And she was so very encouraging. I mean, the first thing she said was, you need to get off this call that we're on right now, and you need to start researching this particular program, email the director, talk to them, see what's going on. And so I felt lucky enough to be able to do the same thing, to go to do an MFA program at 50. And that was where to just be immersed in a world of people who really were talented, excellent, devoted writers, but just like we just didn't get that yes yet, I think. And that made a huge difference for me, just to surround myself with people who are doing the same thing that I was doing.
Absolutely. Community makes all the difference. It does. Jen, what about you? Um, how did your practice take root and how did you end up an essayist?
Yeah. I think this is all stuff I say now with more certainty, but if you had asked me 2 years ago or five or certainly 10 years ago, I maybe wouldn't have seen it quite so clearly. But I used to always tell the story. I used to always talk about how my family did not have books in our house growing up. That my big book opportunity was our road trip from Texas to Iowa. We would go into the gas station and get whatever we wanted, and I could choose candy, but I also chose paperback books. And you all can judge me if you want, but VC Andrews was on the shelf in the gas station, and what is a 13-year-old to do? And that's what I did. And those are the only books that I had, and not until I was a teen. And so I always told that story, and I think I was taken by sort of the miracle of someone who loved language but didn't grow up with books, or maybe it was a little self-pitying. And then it dawned on me, I grew up in a very story-rich house. My mom is a hospice nurse, and my entire life was always telling stories about her patients. And this is all going to come full circle. Now I look back and realize my poems were narrative and revolved around real people. My stepdad was a teacher. He talked constantly about his students. I mean, so real people's stories were omnipresent in my house. It was just an oral storytelling household, which is not atypical for a lot of families, I think. And so um, I think that's where nonfiction or maybe essays started for me in whatever genre wrote in. And in fact, I do occasionally write a story, and I will tell you what often happens in them is that one person is sitting and talking through ideas with another person, which hilariously I think is an essay. It's just got a little plot in it. And so I do that about once every 10 years, and then I work really hard on it, and I don't have to worry about plot again for a while. So I think there's always been a kernel of the writer in me has always really loved true stories and human connection, and maybe systems and how systems come sometimes thwart or encourage that connection, whatever genre I've been writing in. But I want to say for those of you that are listening, maybe the most influential thing that changed my practice was before I went to grad school, I did a conference with Steve Almond. And I remember him saying to us, it was in that moment where you all have maybe had this moment where you think, I want this. I want this badly, and I'm ready to claim it. Like I mean it. I'm serious, but what the hell do I do? And I went to that conference with that idea, like, I'm doing this somehow, I hope. And he just said, those of you that really want this, I don't want you to whine about it. Turn your TV off. I don't think we had Netflix at the time, but turn your TV off, turn off the computers. If you have to wake at 5 a.m. because you have little kids, then wake at 5 a.m. And he was kind of merciless about it, but like in a very tough love way. And I did have very small kids at the time. I think I had a 3 and a 5-year-old roughly about the time I went to that conference. And ever from that moment on, I got a coffee pot with a timer. I got myself so quickly addicted to coffee that if I tried to sleep in, my caffeine headache would wake me up. And so that's what changed my writing practice. I became a 2 hour a day writer from 5 to 7 a.m. For most of the stuff that's in my book was written in the wee hours. And that was really just because he lovingly bullied us, but it worked.
Yeah.
It just needed that daily practice that you were alluding to, Sarah. Yeah.
It sounds like each of you have received a pretty crucial piece of advice at one juncture or another, that really like turned a light on for you. Um, Jen, could you walk us through kind of the process of writing your book? How long did it take you? And you just gave us more insight into kind of the daily process of it, but was it a constant hum? Were there stops and starts? Kind of give us the broad strokes of the writing of your book.
Yeah, it was both a constant hum with stops and starts, I guess. I never felt like I was not going to write again when I had breaks. I never felt like I wasn't being a writer when I was taking breaks. I would always go back. And for me, I needed a little bit like Kalehua, you mentioned the little sparks from the universe when you published something. That was an important part of my process, working really hard on an essay and then sending it out and feeling affirmed by the universe. It was kind of a game I played with myself. I was a slow writer, partly because of the time I could spend and also because I don't know, my process involves self-loathing and it's just it's whatever. I'm a slow writer. So yeah, I was constantly working on stuff, but not quickly. And I would take breaks. Like you mentioned, Parul, I had a story that I put away. It was a fictional story, but I put it away for an entire decade and pulled it back out and then could see it more clearly and got it published. And I thought, well, at this rate, I will have a book in my life before I die. But it took all told about 17 years to write my book. And I would say a lot of it was occasional. Getting away on writing retreats with other writer friends helped make progress, a little momentum. And grad school certainly made me take myself seriously. It's not the only way to write or to write well by any means, but it helped me believe that I was doing something legit just because I needed that kind of affirmation. And I would say the last few years after the book had sold to the publisher, it was a little bit more of an intense push because it had to get done in the form that it was in. But the last quick thing I'll add is that I began the book as a memoir and then decided I really wanted the freedom of an essayist. I wanted to write essays more where I could digress and explore and play with ideas as well as narrative. And so interestingly enough, after it published, everyone calls it a memoir anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah, but it was a 17-year journey more or less. And I said that was the last thing, but there's one quick thing I want to say for those of you that are listening. A buddy of mine was always getting annoyed that people talked about Marilyn Robinson and her gorgeous, one novel, and then the world lost its mind that she'd gotten to a certain age and had only had two novels done. And they were like, yeah, it's gorgeous, but she takes so long to finish a book. Anyway, she did the math, and somewhere in there, she figured out that Marilyn Robinson's productivity increased significantly after her kids graduated from high school. And I was like, well, there we go. Yeah,
Mhm.
that math is real.
And two beautiful books are two beautiful books.
Right? Yeah. No, I'd take it.
Kalehua, walk us through kind of the writing process of your book. How long did it take you? Were there stops and starts, a constant hum? Walk us through it.
Yeah. I like to say it just, like Jennifer, it took decades. It literally took decades. I had been working on poems, right? Just writing poems, not knowing how they would fit into a collection or if they even could make a cohesive collection. And one thing that's interesting, I think, about being at, not 30 is to see what has happened in the publishing industry over time, and especially in poetry. I feel like it used to be okay for a poet to have a collection of poems and they didn't have to form a complete narrative arc. Whereas nowadays, I'm definitely seeing a through line, even if you're working in hybrid forms or you're doing different styles of work within your book, it seems to be more that are published that serve some sort of grander story or tell a full narrative, even in poetry. But I'm noticing it, of course, with short stories too and essays. So it's pretty interesting to see that. So when I started collecting poems, I thought it would be perfectly fine to just have these random poems or a selection of poems. And I would send them out from time to time as a collection or a chapbook, not get any pulse on it at all and just sort of keep plugging away. But my mother actually passed away in 2018. And from that experience of caring for my mother and dealing with my grief and thinking about the grief of my family and my siblings and my children, I just wrote so much more than I had before. And I felt like the work, of course, over time was infinitely better just because of the experiences that I had, the classes that I had taken to help me be better at crafting the poem instead of just this sort of deluge of emotion that goes onto the page. That's sort of the first maybe 2 or 3 drafts, right? And then as you sort of look at what's the big picture that you're painting and how to get that across in a succinct, powerful way, all of those things sort of came together for me. So it really was, like Jennifer was saying, during the MFA process where I gained more confidence, workshopped a lot more, had a lot more eyes on the work, was able to do a lot of revisions. And then I had an incredible mentor who helped me sort of piece together what I had already written over time and incorporating the new work that I was generating. That was, it's kind of the core of what my book is really, is how do you deal with this grief and lineage? So that's kind of how it came together. I would revise it and send it out and not get any bites. And then, oh, I should revise it some more. Oh, revise it some more and send it out. And I just got to a point where I was like, I just need to be confident in the work as it is and stop touching it. And then I think after I sort of made that decision, I sent it out to maybe 3 or 4 contests. This was on like a Thursday or a Friday. And I got contacted by my publisher the following week. And that was actually another interesting process that maybe Parul and Jennifer can talk about too. It's like you're so excited about that first offer or interest. And I had to really rein myself in and think about, well, is this a publisher that I know? Do I have any friends or colleagues who've worked with this publisher? What's their experience? What is even a contract? What do I want in the contract? What does it look like? There are all these other pieces that popped up for me that I'm glad that I took a step back, because there's so much excitement about that. It's like, oh, finally somebody wants the whole thing. They want to publish this book. And of course, being of a different generation where, to me, print just adds a certain legitimacy that maybe online printing wouldn't have for me, but might have for someone who's younger. I really wanted a print book to sell to someone. So I was glad that I took some time to think about, well, okay, what are the big questions that I want to ask here? And to really sort of talk to the editor and think long and hard about, is this the right fit? Is this the right time for this book? Even though you've been waiting for so long, it's hard to sort of rein it in. But I just got really lucky. I love my publisher is Trio House. I don't know, Jennifer, if you know them at all. They're based in Minneapolis. It's been a pretty amazing experience.
Oh, wonderful. And your book is incredibly cohesive and beautiful. And I definitely want to circle back to this publication question of where to send it, how you know it's a right fit, what questions to ask. But Parul, I do want to hear from you. Your very, very rich novel. Briefly walk us through kind of the writing process, because I know so much work went into this book.
Yeah, I mean, the writing process was long and complicated and very drawn out. So as I say, I started it when I was in the MFA program at Columbia, and I was a young woman who wanted to be an artist, a writer. And so, maybe naturally I gravitated towards writing about young women wanting to be artists, but in very different circumstances. So Jennifer was talking about how her mother and her stepfather both told stories related to their work and, what they saw and experienced during the day. And in my case, my father had a lot, he would talk a lot about India, like not to give me lessons, but things would just spark off in his memory and he'd remember some things. He was a very nostalgic person. And when I started this novel, and I'm a journalist, so that's the other thing that made everything very complicated, because being a journalist, I wanted to be sure that everything I wrote was true and factual. Not true in the sense that the story is true, but that it's factual, right? So what kind of paints did a painting student in the 1950s in India use? Were oil paints freely available? Every little thing became complex because no, you couldn't import paints from Europe, and then people would create their own paints, and what was the process of doing that, and so forth. So, so I wanted all that to be very true to what it, and how did you even stretch a canvas? Besides the technicalities of art, like in everything that I wrote, I wanted to be very accurate. problem was I wasn't in India. I wasn't doing the research. I relied a lot on my dad. Obviously, he didn't know about painting and dance, but those were two arts that I was personally very interested in and had done a little of myself. And so, but he told me a lot of general stuff about the 50s in India. And so I drew on him, and then he's told me so much about his life that actually this new novel that I'm writing is based a lot on his own life. But I think, and I tell myself in retrospect, if I had just given myself permission to go to India for, like, let's say 4 months and say, I'm going to do all the research I need to do. I had gotten married, but my husband, we didn't have any children at that time, I could go to India. It didn't occur to me. I never thought that I could just do something like that. So I really encourage writers, it's not, you don't have to go to India, but whatever is the thing you need to do, it might cost time, money, etc., but give yourself that permission. I think I could have made it much less painful for myself if I had thought to do that. And anyway, so because I only I went to India occasionally on a trip, and then I tried to weave in my research, the whole process of writing it was very protracted. And I worked on it literally off and on. I had moved to Europe. I was working there as a journalist. 25 years I spent on it. And when I got to year 25, I couldn't find an agent for it. And then I just said, I'm putting it away. And so that day I just was like, I'm going on to my next project. I can't give my entire life, right? I already given 25 years. And so I put it in a box, but I had a really good feeling. Like, I thought, I'm going to be so disappointed, like, all this time for nothing, I'm just putting it away. But I didn't have a disappointed feeling. I felt energized, like, I think this novel is good. I got like a good vibration from the cardboard box, like a big box that you get paper in. And so anyway, but it did stay put away for 10 years. I talked to various people about it off and on. I worked on my next novel. And then I noticed, I think the internet changed a lot. Like Kalehua was talking about, online classes. But what I discovered was there were online classes. And then I could also just sort of see through Facebook, even, like, my friends who were writers, like, what were they doing? They were submitting their novels to contests and things like that. So, I also really encourage people to copy other writers, not in terms of obviously what they're writing, but how they might be getting published. Where are they publishing? What are they submitting their work to? And so one of my friends had submitted to the AWP prize for the novel. And so I thought, well, I'll submit my novel, because my novel was very long. That first draft was something like 600 pages. Most contests have a severe limit, like 100,000 words. Mine was almost 200,000 words. So I read the instructions like several times. There was really no word limit. I was like, okay, I can submit here. And I submitted. And then lo and behold, like 3 or 4 months later, I was notified that I won. And then, so this 25-year-long process, suddenly I was told by the University of Nebraska Press, who was the partner who was going to publish it, that you have to cut your novel down to like 120,000 words maximum. We cannot take a manuscript that's 195,000 words. Then I was like, okay, so your editor will help me, right? And they were like, no, we can't even look at it until it's down. And they had this whole publishing cycle, right? So I was like, and they said at the most they could give me was 4 months. They were even saying 3 months, but I was like, how am I going to cut a novel in half in 3 or 4 months after all these years? And so then they gave me 4 months, and I found a freelance editor, and then I found a freelance copy editor. That was the most intense I've ever worked in my life. And we were building a house at the same time, and there were other crises in my life. But I would go to hotels sometimes for 2 or 3 weeks to just kind of work around the clock. And there were times when I thought, I can't do this, because there were also a lot of problems with our home build. But I did get it done. And, I had a good freelance editor, and I had a great copy editor that I submitted, a line editor in England, again, all this connection through the internet. And so I turned in a manuscript that they almost didn't touch. Like, their editor had like maybe 6 comments on it. And that was it.
Wow.
The copy editor had more, but so it was a strange process. I don't know if
That's
anyone,
incredible.
yeah.
Um, wow. I love that both Kalehua and Parul, you both, when you decided that your book was ready, that it was good, that it was worth publishing, it sounds like almost, immediately then the universe responded. Not to be too woo-woo about it, but with the good vibrations coming from the box and, just
I love
Yeah, but
that.
it did take 10 years, right? It was in the box for 10 years until
mm,
I discovered all these
right.
processes of these contests and things like that. Yeah.
But you didn't forget about it. You didn't
No,
let
I never forgot
it
about it.
good. It didn't
And
meet the shredder.
if it's okay if I interject
Yeah,
here, but
please.
I do think it's interesting, Parul, that I had not understood that during the publication process that the editors might say, "Oh, we would like you to cut such and such," or "this is not the arc we're looking for," or I mean, I had really no idea that someone would intervene like that, because that did happen where my editor suggested changes or made suggestions and let me sort of get to a certain point with them. But I was sort of like you, like, this is this thing I've been working on for so long. So many people have looked at it and I've reordered it and I've proofread it and I've done all these things to figure out if it's the best that it can be. And you're telling me that it has to be different. That was a really sort of rude awakening as part of the process for me.
Mhm.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about working with Trio Press?
Yeah, Trio House is my press. And you were talking earlier about if we find sort of the right fit
Mhm.
for our work, and certainly I hear that a lot for poetry. I don't know how it is really for prose, but people talk about that a lot when you take classes or you talk to other people. Oh, you should read books by these particular presses or journals, like do your research to see if your work will fit in that realm, which I think that can be really unrealistic a lot of times, because I just don't have the resources to go seek out all these different journals and try to figure out if my work is going to fit there. So for Trio House, I really went with them because I did like a lot of the books that they had published in the previous maybe 2 or 3 years. Someone from my program had been published by them. Another friend of mine had worked with them. So when they had their contest, I thought, okay, that felt like a good place to try to land. And I really loved that we have an executive editor there's Chris Biak, and then she assigned me the editor that would work specifically on my book, and her name is Denise Lowe. And I just really love that Denise is another native poet, someone who could hopefully have more of a connection to the approach that I have to the writing that I do. And they have a pretty tight publication cycle. So that helped me structure wise in terms of the work that I needed to do in terms of revision, reordering, reintroducing poems that maybe I had taken out of the manuscript before, which I thought was also an interesting strategy that Denise said. She said, "Well, were there things that maybe you would have wanted to keep in? What have I not seen?" So that was kind of fun to go back and see how those puzzle pieces fit. But overall, I think their structure helped me as a writer to figure out where I needed to be, in terms of the production schedule. Um, and then it's interesting, like there's the creative and then there's sort of the administrative and the business part of writing. And they were very kind to me as I sort of learned more about the administration and the business end of publication. So yeah, it's really been great. They've been super supportive too in terms of social media. I know that's kind of a rough thing for a lot of folks. I don't particularly enjoy it, but they also promote their writers quite a lot on social, which is really, for me, it's helpful. So it's been really enjoyable. And I hope I'm not giving anything away, but my next book will be on Trio House Press as well. So I'm happy to be with
Wonderful. Oh,
them.
that's great news. Jen, let's hear from you about your publication process. How did you decide to send your book to Milkweed? Did you work with an agent? Did you query first? let us know how that process was for you.
Sure. A good friend of mine kept telling me it was time to query agents, and I said, I don't really have the book done yet, though. And he said, that's okay, you don't have to have it done. And I resisted and resisted, and he said, can I just have pages from one essay? And I said, but the book's not done. So even if you share it with your agent friend, I don't know that it's going to do any good. The book's not done. And he said, just give me one essay of all your essays. Can I have one? And so I gave him the one that I was most proud of at the time, and it hasn't held up for me. I'm not as proud of it now as I was, but that's okay. It's okay. In the moment, I was feeling it, and that agent was really lovely. She reached out and asked for a conversation, and she said, "I like your work. Um, I want to read more, and I would love to represent you." And I said, "Well, that's super flattering, but I don't have a book yet." You know what I mean? I was sort of terrified to sign without a book, and I was a little nervous that I would start hearing things from her or publishers that would suggest a different kind of book than what I knew to write. And it's not that I don't trust editors. I really do. They always make me smarter. It was more that I needed to hear myself think first about what kind of book I was making. And so Jennifer Thompson, bless her, held on for 2 years while I poked around. And finally, during the pandemic, when I was doing genuinely nothing. Kalehua, you were actually writing. I was like wandering my house, going for walks. Like I just was not very productive. And she reached out and said, "Come on now, what do you think?" Approximately every 6 months, she would just check in with me. And I thought, I'm not writing right now. I was fresh off of a divorce. My kids were home. It was just, it was the long days of the pandemic. And I thought this yet again will make me feel real. It'll make me feel like I'm a real writer with a book under contract, and that will make me feel like I have to get it done. And so I went ahead and signed it. And I still remember where I was sitting. It was dark. I was sitting on my bed. I don't know if it was the middle of the night or 4 in the afternoon. Minnesota, for 6 months out of the year, 4 in the afternoon looks like midnight. So I don't know. But I signed it, and from there it felt like I needed to get the book done, and that was essentially it. And I worked with her. I trusted her a lot. She sent it through a long list of editors. We had tiers, and a lot of my writer friends like to know who's looking at their book at any moment in time and then who passes on it. I did not need that knowledge. I just said, let's go with tiers, and then when you need to get back to me, you can just let me know if there are any notes that I need to be aware of, and then we can like revisit the next queue. And Milkweed happens to be in my hometown, and so I know the press really well. They're lovely, thoughtful, smart, hardworking humans, and I was really, really elated when they wanted to pick up the book. And I also had the really strange honor of being approached by my editor, who is Mary Austin Speaker, a poet, and she asked for a call because she thought that I would maybe be reluctant to work with a poet as an editor. And I was like, Mary, poetry is the source. Like how could anyone not feel like that's the way to go? Absolutely. And so I happen to think that poets who become essayists make the best essayists, because they're comfortable with language and leaps and space. And so I was really elated to get to work with a poet as an editor, and she saw a lot of shadows that I hadn't pulled out yet, to make visible. And it's a much better book because of the editing process, which, Parul, I'm sorry to say, I had 2 years more or less from the time I signed before the book was printed. I would have probably laid on the ground and thrown a tantrum if someone told me I had to pull that book together in 4 months. So you're made of stronger stuff than I am,
You pulled off a miracle.
honestly.
So Jen, what's been your process kind of promoting the book and meeting readers and just having it out in the world?
Well, the Twin Cities, for those of you that are from Texas, if you don't know, it's a pretty literary community. It's a pretty active community. My dumb joke right now is that my new political platform is I'm not going to anybody's stuff anymore, and I'm not even doing my own stuff, because it's just you can walk. My other favorite joke about the Twin Cities is that when you walk out of your house, people start throwing, and you're a poet or a writer, people start throwing chunks of money at your head, just like it's a really well-funded state for the arts, and there are just a lot of artists here. And so that is to say there are quite a lot of readings that you don't have to work super hard to be invited to, because it's just it's a really robust energized arts community. I like Kalehua. I'm not that much a social media fanatic. It takes me approximately 16 hours to make one Instagram post. I'm like, where are my reading glasses? And what am I supposed to say? And that's dumb. And I thought that I was posting pages and now it's on my story. What's going on? I do it a little bit, but yeah, the self-promotion is not the most comfortable part for me. It's gotten easier, but oof, yeah, it's most of us don't write to be in front of a microphone.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's really great. I feel the same way in Austin sometimes. It's every night of the week I could be at a
Right?
meeting or a literary event, and it's a beautiful problem to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Um, so Kalehua, you were mentioning your the social media of it all, the promotion of it all. How has it felt for you having your work read by others, by having people respond to it, promoting it? How has that felt?
Well, I I don't know why people are reading it. I mean, I really am sort of baffled and pleased and flattered, mostly because it's poetry. Not that I want to give poetry a bad rap, but it just really is not as read as other genres. So I sort of just think that I'm flying under the radar. But when people do reach out, I'm just tickled. I definitely, as Jennifer said, like I never thought as a writer I would get attention for the work that I was doing. I don't mind. Um, I don't mind promotion. I love reading, actually. I mean, that's actually one of the funnest parts for me. Is to read my work and then to get the reaction of folks, whether they're not understanding what I'm saying or where I'm coming from, or they, hone right in, because we're so isolated, right? And I know how I feel about the work. I know what I'm bringing to it, and it's fascinating to me to observe and experience what other people are getting from it, because that was something I had no expectation of what that was going to be like. And when people started to respond in certain ways, it was an interesting feeling to understand that to be perceived is an element of putting things out into the world that I had not taken into account really at all. Because I was just sort of writing my poems for myself and sticking them in a file and not really thinking about it. So I do enjoy reading. I do love when people connect with me. My most favorite responses that I've gotten so far are when folks write in saying they've had a deep loss in their family, or something has happened to them and they were really trying to figure out how to process their grief, or how to even think about what our lineage is, or what happens to this legacy that you have when you're related to people who are no longer here, to keep that connection strong. And that makes me feel definitely less alone. And like, yes, that I wrote this book because I wanted other people to understand how I feel. And now it's great that I can kind of get a little read into how other people are feeling based on what I wrote. It's quite profound. So those are sort of the moments that I really live for and enjoy. The sort of self promotion, I think I just over time, and I just have to get more comfortable with it. I think because it is part of the selling of the books, which can get a little boggy at times. But the connection with other people is the part that I enjoy the most.
It's so true. That's the root impulse. And I do appreciate y'all being perceived in front of us tonight. And I hope it feels maybe a bit warmer and safer because we're all writers here. We all feel you. Um, Parul, what about you? How has it felt promoting the book, having people actually hold it and write it and have you sign it? How has that process felt?
I've enjoyed it, and Nebraska has been a really good press to be with. I've really liked working with them. I mean, apart from that first shock of like I have to do all the editing, get it done on my own. Um, but they're a small press, right? So and I actually had become before my book, before publication date, I was part of a poets and writers cohort called Get the Word Out. Poets and Writers has started this kind of program. You apply to it, and if you get accepted, then you become, every week they have a kind of seminar on some aspect of book publicity. Or I can't remember how many weeks it ran for, let's say 8 weeks. And once a week for like 3 hours, some particular aspect of publicity, whether a bookstore owner comes and tells you about, how to have a book event, or people who work in marketing and publicity and big publishers, tell you about the great packages they put together, for their books. And so one of those had come on, and, they create all kinds of really cute, like press release with little novelties and a beautiful little packet that they send to bookstores. And I think also like reviewers and people like that. So I was like, okay, I know, obviously University of Nebraska can't do anything like that. So then I decided that I would like create these packages. So that was also a very ambitious undertaking. I had hired a freelance publicist. So she had created like the press release for my book and things like that. But then even just putting these packets together, and I went on Canva, I'd never done that, but like designed a bookmark, designed the postcard, that I could write a note to bookstore owners on the back. And then and then I had like an assembly line with my son and a woman who helps me in the house, like creating these 90 packages and like a kind of personalized note to the bookstore owner. But I was all gung-ho. I really wanted to do as much as I could for my book. And, and whatever I could do on social media. I mean, I'm not a huge presence, but, everything that I could do for it, I was eager to do. And like Kalehua said, it was really, I really enjoy like talking to people who, might come to the reading or book event or whatever, and or going to book clubs sometimes and seeing their response. And sometimes I feel like like a friend recently just posted on Facebook about my book. She had read it, and then, and she had got her book club to read it. And she was just writing about what her response was. And sometimes the responses are so much more beautiful than anything that I could say about my book. It's like I'm learning from other people about, the way that they see into my book. Or even sometimes reviewers, I've like taken, things that reviewers have said to kind of put it into my own pitch letters, because I thought they could say it so much better than, than it's even said in my press release or whatever. So I think readers bring a lot to a book. They can make their authors see their book better or to understand it better. So I've enjoyed it.
Oh, good. I'm glad. That sounds like a wonderful program. Get the word out. That poets.
Yeah, it's for poets. They do it alternately, I think 1 season for poets and 1 season for fiction writers. And I think mostly people who are publishing with smaller or indie presses.
Yeah, that's really great. Well, I'm glad you've had a positive experience. I can't believe time is going so quickly. I want to ask one more question, and then I want to peek at what audience questions we have. But what's something you all wish someone had told you earlier in your writing or publishing process that you would like to impart on the writers listening tonight? And Kalehua, we'll start with you.
I knew you were going to start with me because I don't have anything. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think the thing that actually sort of helped steady me throughout the whole process, I guess, is, well, maybe there were 2 things. One is that I can always return to the work, that the page is always waiting for me, and that I feel some reassurance in that, no matter if I have to take a break or where life is taking me. Like I don't write every day. I try to. It just doesn't happen that way. That's kind of not how my process is. But the page is always there. And I think the second thing is probably it really, it's okay to take a minute and step back and think about what the big picture is. It's very exciting when you want something so so bad, and if it's starting to materialize and happen for you. And it was really important to me throughout the whole process of publication to just take a step back and think about, is this really the route that I want to take? Is this really serving how I want to exist with this book? Because there's there's the maker, and then there's the book, and they're very separate entities. At least my experience has been, the book has its own life. So I was thinking about not only my own trajectory, but the trajectory of the book too. So I think those would be the two things that at least helped me out through the process.
Oh, well said. Jen, what about you? What advice would you give our writers?
Yeah, I when I work with folks in an editorial capacity who are coming to writing later and maybe from less traditional spaces, I feel like I want to encourage them to build or maintain a writing community, kind of like you had said, Sarah. And I know you're all thinking, didn't you just say you're not going to anyone's events? It's just what I say, so I don't feel bad about being busy, everybody. I love it. I love you all. I love all of it. The fact that I was always among other writers, I think, is what really made me continue to feel like this was a shared endeavor. It gave me inspiration, like Parul. I watched the way other people were publishing. I watched their journey. I just don't know if I would have finished a book if it hadn't been for community. It was community who passed my book along to an agent. I mean, it's just it's also the point of it. You know what I mean? The book is lovely, but it's really the people along the way that have made my life rich. And so a book all by myself for the sake of it, going into the void, wouldn't have meant much. But to finish it and have my community waiting on the other side, cheering and holding up a copy for me is sort of like the whole freaking point, which I didn't know until I was done. So for sure, community, I mean, certainly through this organization, absolutely, or something like it. And if even one person, one other writer, two writers, 10 writers, whatever you can tolerate if you're an introvert. But that is huge. And then the other thing that I would add, I guess, this might be just particular to me, and I'd be curious to see what other people, what the other writers think. But I think, Kalehua, you've alluded to it a little bit, like having a book that you're proud of, not just having a book for the sake of a book. And so trying to balance that out. I just want to say you have permission to be as slow as you want to make it something you're proud of. Someone once told me the only thing worse than not getting published is publishing something you're embarrassed about. And I'm not embarrassed about my book. That's not what this is about. But because many of the essays in the book got published along the way, I can tell you a lot got left out. And I would be really delighted if the websites that some of them are on just went away. It's just, it's okay, like to put the time and love into the project and make it not just a book with a spine, but a book you're proud of with a spine. So,
Yeah, well said. Wholeheartedly co-sign. Parul, what about you? What do you wish you'd been told earlier?
Well, I mean, I do totally agree about this thing about community. That really helped me again with this when the internet really got going, and I met a couple of two other Indian American writers online, and we've been an enormous support to each other, I think now for like 13 years, even though we don't really trade writing, but everything but, just we used to have a weekly check-in. Now it's monthly, but it's been many years. But I will just go back to the point that I made, that where I wished that I had tried to understand, why am I feeling kind of stuck, or why is this book taking me so long? So maybe I'm addressing it more to people who are in some ways stuck, or just feel like I'm not moving at the pace that I want to, or I just feel like, every day is going into this, and when will it be done? So like I said, you don't have to make a research trip to India. It's not going to apply to you, but maybe just, I wish I had stepped back, brainstorm. What is it that I really need? Maybe it's just, I don't know, you just need to talk to one person. And I will say that I always felt very energized when I researched my book like a journalist. What I mean is talking to people. Like journalism is all about interviewing people, right? So I would interview, when I did do the research, I would interview, let's say, artists who had been around in India in the 50s, or my artist character is also a medical student. So I went to medical college in Bombay, and when I researched it, it was still very much like it was in the 50s. Now it's changed a lot. So, maybe you feel energized, even if you want to talk to one or two people. Maybe you want somebody to give you feedback on what you've written so far, right? Maybe you can find a friend or something like that. So, ask yourself, what is it that you need if you are feeling stuck? What would be the ideal thing? And then give yourself permission to say, okay, I'm going to do this. It's going to cost me money. I'm not saying, obviously, that you do things that you absolutely can't afford, but, even if it's going to cost you some money, like, do it, because it might be very beneficial for your book, and you put a lot of time and energy probably into it. So give yourself that permission, and I had given a talk at Interlochen when I won the prize. So I had gone to Interlochen, the Arts Academy for, high school arts academy in Michigan. And so I said, they wanted me to speak to their students about various things. And so one of them, I said, let your art make demands on your life. And I was always trying to do the opposite. Like, I wanted to write, but I didn't want it to intrude too much on my son and my husband and things like that. But maybe I should have let it do that a little bit more. So, I think the writer can interrogate themselves. What do I need to get this done? And then allow yourself the ability to do that.
Well said. We do have a bustling Q&A here to dig into, folks. So I'm going to go ahead and ask some questions. So Chuck is asking, Kalehua, could you give us a brief idea of what a low residency MFA is? And then could you also let us know how could you piece together some basic skills and succeed without an MFA? Because I know we've all said here that that's possible too. Could you?
Yeah, it's absolutely possible, for sure. Well, first of all, I think a lot of us know of a full residency MFA program, which is more traditional, where you're enrolled at a school, you probably go to classes 2 to 3 times a week for a semester at a time, and maybe you do student teaching. It's an immersive process. For me, the low residency MFA was kind of ideal because I could do that around what I felt was sort of my familial obligation. There's that permission piece that I love that you mentioned, Parul, for sure. I had to really talk myself into applying and going. A low residency MFA program usually has a meeting, maybe a week to 10 or 12 days. My program met once a year. Other programs meet twice a year. And that is when you go to a campus or you go to a central location and you take your classes and you meet with your advisors, and that's kind of where your learning is happening: seminars, workshops, advisors. And then for the rest of the year, at least in my program, you're assigned a mentor, and you send in your writing packets every 4 to 5 weeks. And so my program was the Rainier Writing Workshop at Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, Washington. And our program is 3 years. We only meet once a year for 10 days, but we're on the PLU campus immersed in classes. And the classes go from 8 a.m. to, 3 or 4 p.m. And then there are readings by the faculty every evening and guest lecturers who also teach. So for me, that was a good fit because I could manage it. I could give myself the permission to go do that for the 10-day period every year. The packets that we sent, at least for my program, and I know that like IAIA and Antioch are like this, we would submit a critical writing sample and a creative packet every 4 to 5 weeks. And for poets, the first year we had 7 packets, and I think we did maybe 4 to 5 poems and 3 short critical writings for each of those packets. And you meet with your mentor via Zoom. That's how we did it anyway, to go over those packets after they've gone through it. So I hope that's helpful. And there are so many programs with different structures, different ways they do it. I know some are hybrid where they have in-person meetings, but they also incorporate people who who dial in virtually as well. So there are a lot of options for folks.
Yeah.
And then your other question about not necessarily needing an MFA or, I mean, I don't think you need one. For me, what helped the most with the MFA, what it offered me, I mean, other than the learning and just being with other people, seeking the same opportunities in writing and trying to develop our craft was definitely community. So both Jennifer and Parul are bringing that up. I think that's key. Whether, yeah, if you just have a couple of writer friends that you're checking in with, a Discord group, I mean, something where you're held accountable and also holding other people accountable and can get some feedback here or there. The MFA provided me with community and guidance, certainly from my mentors and instructors who did sort of make suggestions about where I could go or where I could submit the work or where I could take my writing. So hopefully there are organizations like this or other places where you can have access to that as well if the MFA is not working.
Yeah, I'll definitely add to that there's organizations like ours that do provide the same frameworks that MFAs are meant to provide. We have more breadth and a bigger membership, but sometimes we can be a stepping stone to an MFA, but there are definitely ways to get the things that you would get an MFA: community, critique, growing your skill set that you can get from other organizations. But on the MFA front, there's so many options. So definitely do your research and reach out to folks that have been to them and learn about their experience. Parul, someone is asking, do you recommend hiring a freelance editor? What was your experience with working with a freelance editor, and how did you find one?
Okay, so I would say yes, I would recommend it. Like, I mean, in my case, I had to, right? Because I had this sprawling novel and I had too much stuff going on in my life, and how am I going to cut it down? So I absolutely needed it. Now, nowadays, and also, I was telling you the story, like my book sat in a box for 10 years. And so before I put it away, I also, way back then, I considered getting a freelance editor, but the field had not developed as much, right? There were very few, even this whole online culture had not developed that much. I found one woman, she was more of a nonfiction book editor, and she was charging like $10,000 or $15,000. And I was like, and I don't even know if I'm going to get it published. So I was just like, no, I can't do that. So I put it away. But now it's a much more developed field in that there's a lot of very good editors who have worked in New York publishing, like the woman that was my freelance editor. She had worked as an executive editor at a big publisher. And so there's a lot of people, at least a good number of people like that. And how you find them is, I mean, that I was asking a friend, like, how do I find an editor, right? Because it's not that easy. You don't know who's good and who's not good. But there are certain, like, this one is my editor's group. It's called 5E. I'm pretty sure she's part of 5E, but that's a well-known group, 5E. And then there's others, that have legitimate, good freelance editors. You can ask around, I guess. And so I would say that if you're very sure of your story, you've spent a good amount of time on it, gotten it to the best stage that you can, maybe give it to a couple of people if people are willing to read your novel and give you some commentary. But if you're submitting, let's say, to agents and it's not getting accepted and people are giving you some comments and you have a good feeling that, this could work, then I would say yes. That's another thing of like invest. They still charge a lot of money, right? So it will be a big investment. So a lot of it is your own feeling, like how strongly do you feel about it? And, are you willing to pay the money? But it can be worth it, I would say, yes.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, with anything, definitely do your research, do your homework. Don't go with just anyone. Thank you for sharing. Jen, would you take us home? We have one more question I'm going to pose, and I think this will speak to you. How does an introvert who likes to work in isolation build a writer's community?
It's a great question. Well, the first piece of good news is that most of the writers are also introverts, so you can sit quietly together and read. I initially built mine through a writing conference. There's an amazing one if you want to fly out to Minnesota called the Bemidji Writers Workshop, something like that, Northwood Writers Workshop in Bemidji. But I'm sure that the Writers League of Texas could recommend some. I mean, look for a good writers workshop, and then you will walk into the room with many other trepidatious writers who are trying to figure this out. And it's usually a really warm and loving space. And if it's not, then those are not your people. And so that's the first step. I would say even a class, like through the Writers League or elsewhere for sure. And usually the best sign that you are finding your community is when someone's work resonates with you. And when you really like the way they're, not just what they're responding, when they give other folks feedback, but what am I trying to say? Not just the thoughts that they give, but the manner with which they give them, right? So if someone makes you feel, I don't know, for me, I was always gravitating toward other writers who were funny and wicked and smart, and I just thought I want to be around their brains when I'm trying to utilize my own brain. And so yeah, go where the writers are, and they will energize you until you have to pass out, and then you can just go home and curl up.
Yes, go where the writers are. We're all introverts, it's true. We're all a little awkward and weird, but we are in this together. I cannot thank y'all enough for joining us tonight. This was delightful. I feel inspired to recommit myself to my work in progress that is going on a long, long time, and it's okay. And I'm good with it. So I hope all of you out there are feeling equally inspired. I hope you'll order and read these beautiful books that you can tell so much love went into crafting them. Thank you all for taking the time to be here tonight. I hope to see you all at the next WLT event.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank
Thanks.
you all so much. I
Good
really
to meet
appreciate
everyone.
it.
Appreciate it. It was
you.
nice to be back in Texas virtually.
Yes. Welcome home. Good night, everyone.